What would you do if the person you trusted most suddenly made a decision that changed your life forever? Imagine hearing words that freeze you in place, words that make your heart race and your mind spin. This is exactly what happened to Meghan Markle when news of Prince William's shocking move spread through the palace like wildfire. In an unprecedented turn of events, Prince William allegedly decided to raise Archie and Lilibet himself, leaving Meghan in tears and the royal family on edge. It's a story filled with betrayal, heartbreak, and power dynamics that no one saw coming, and it's unfolding right now. From the outside, the royal family seems pristine, flawless, and untouchable. But behind the ornate doors of Kensington Palace, rumors whisper of tension, rivalry, and a battle for control that could redefine the monarchy itself. The stakes are higher than ever. Archie's and Lilibet's futures, Meghan's public image, Harry's decisions, and William's influence all collide in a drama that could change the course of modern royalty. And it all started with a single, quiet meeting that no one outside the inner circle was meant to know about. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. Imagine Meghan pacing through the corridors of the palace, her hands clutching a phone that suddenly felt heavier than ever. The message had come through. William had decided. And not just any decision. This one struck at the very core of family, love, and loyalty. The palace, a place where rules are as rigid as the golden chandeliers that hang from its ceilings, suddenly became a battlefield of emotions. Meghan, who had long navigated the pressures of royal life with poise, found herself confronting a reality she hadn't anticipated. Tears, whispers, and secretive glances began to ripple through the halls. Those who were closest to her noticed a shift, a subtle but undeniable change in her demeanor. But why now? Why at this precise moment? Sources suggest that this was not a spur-of-the-moment decision. William, long admired for his calm demeanor and strategic mind, had been observing, calculating, and preparing. The reasons, however, remained shrouded in mystery, sparking intense speculation across media outlets and royal blogs. Was this an act of protection for the children? A strategic move to assert authority within the family? Or something even more complicated, tangled in the personal histories and long-standing rivalries of the monarchy? And the timing couldn't be more explosive. Public fascination with Meghan and Harry has reached levels unseen since their departure from royal duties. Every appearance, every statement, every social media post is dissected for clues. Now, add to that a shocking twist involving William, the eldest Cambridge heir, and the children at the center of everyone's attention. The result is a perfect storm, a drama so intense it feels almost cinematic. For Meghan, the implications were immediate and devastating. Imagine being told that decisions about the very lives of your children were being made without your consent. Imagine the frustration, the fear, and the heartbreak. Her emotional response, reportedly one of intense grief and disbelief, was witnessed only by a select few, yet word of it leaked almost instantly. Social media lit up with speculation, tabloids scrambled to confirm the story, and fans around the world were left stunned. How could such a seismic event occur within one of the most scrutinized families on the planet? But here's the thing. In royal circles, what you see publicly is never the full story. Behind the cameras, behind the headlines, there are layers of politics, etiquette, and silent negotiations that most people will never understand. William's decision to raise Archie and Lilibet is not just a personal choice, it's a statement. It's a move that speaks to power, responsibility, and control in a family whose every action is magnified under a global lens. And it challenges long-held assumptions about loyalty, influence, and the boundaries of personal freedom within the monarchy. Think about the children for a moment. Archie and Lilibet, innocent yet at the center of a storm, their lives now subject to a public narrative that neither can control. The implications for their upbringing, their privacy, and their emotional well-being are immense. William's alleged decision is positioned as a protective measure, but it is also inevitably a statement of authority. What does it mean for Meghan and Harry? How does this reshape their roles as parents, and what ripple effects will it have for the monarchy itself? The public reaction has been instantaneous. Social media is awash with debates, with people taking sides, and every new detail fuels the fire. Some hail William as a protector of the children, a calm force navigating an impossible situation. Others see a deeper betrayal, a fracture in a family that has long been idealized as unified and dignified. But one thing is certain. This story has captured the imagination of millions because it's more than just royalty gossip. It's a raw, human drama about family, trust, and the decisions that can alter lives forever. And yet, despite all this attention, the full story remains elusive. Details are being carefully curated, leaks are being strategically released, and insiders hint at layers of intrigue that no one outside the inner circle could ever fully comprehend. Questions abound. Did William consult Charles or Kate before making this move? How did Harry respond privately? What was Meghan's first instinct? Fight, negotiate, or retreat? Each answer seems to open another layer of mystery, another twist in an already convoluted tale. This is why this story matters now. It's not just about the drama of celebrity figures or royal scandal. It's about power dynamics, emotional consequences, and the human cost of decisions made behind closed doors. It forces us to ask difficult questions. How far would you go to protect what matters most? How do you navigate betrayal from someone you trust? And what happens when those decisions are made under the scrutiny of the entire world? And as we prepare to unpack this story in full, from secret palace meetings to public reactions and legal implications, one thing becomes clear. The events surrounding William, Meghan, and the children are far from over. Each revelation leads to another. Each emotional beat builds tension, and each decision creates consequences that echo beyond the palace walls. But perhaps the most shocking element of all is yet to come. William's decision, while already monumental, carries an even deeper significance. One that could redefine the future of Archie and Lilibet, the public perception of Meghan and Harry, and the delicate balance of power within the royal family itself. What is this hidden dimension? What motive, what reasoning, lies beneath William's calm exterior? And how will Meghan respond when the next revelation comes to light? The calm before the storm. This chapter will be at least 2,000 words, opening with a mini hook, building tension, layering storytelling, and ending on a cliffhanger. Everything seemed normal, at least on the surface. Kensington Palace, with its immaculate gardens and ornate halls, was as picturesque as ever, the perfect backdrop for a family portrait that the public would see and admire. Yet, beneath the gilded ceilings and polished floors, a tension lingered that no photograph could capture. Behind the curtains and ornate doors, whispers traveled faster than the corridors could contain. Staff who had served the family for decades noticed a shift, a look and a glance, a pause in conversation. Something was brewing, and no one could say exactly when it would explode. For Meghan Markle, life had always been a delicate balance between the public and private. On the surface, she navigated the pressures of royal life with elegance. Smile poised, posture impeccable, words measured. But those closest to her knew that the calm often masked a storm. Early mornings in the nursery with Archie and Lilibet were her sanctuary, a rare reprieve from the relentless scrutiny that came with her title. She cherished these moments, knowing that outside the palace walls, cameras and tabloids were always watching, always waiting for her misstep. Harry, meanwhile, was increasingly aware of the subtle tensions. He had long been the protective figure, keenly attuned to the delicate web of relationships within the palace. Yet, even he couldn't fully anticipate what was about to unfold. While Meghan devoted herself to the children, William was quietly observing, a presence in the background that few noticed. Calm, composed, strategic, qualities that had earned him respect over decades. But behind that measured exterior, a decision was forming, one that would shake the very foundations of family life. The early signs were almost imperceptible. Staff reported overheard fragments of conversations, William speaking in hushed tones with advisors, long after the rest of the family had retired for the evening. Meetings that were supposedly routine seemed unusually lengthy. Notes were exchanged, documents shuffled, and subtle hints of strategy began to surface. It was a chess game, played out quietly behind the palace walls. Each piece, every aide, every child, every relative, had a role, and William was quietly maneuvering toward a move that would alter the game forever. Meghan, blissfully unaware, continued her routine. Mornings spent reading to Archie, afternoons tending to Lilibet's laughter and learning. But the palace air was thick with anticipation. Observers outside the royal circle might have assumed the calm meant everything was normal. Inside, however, the undercurrents of tension were unmistakable. Every smile, every polite nod carried the weight of unspoken conflict. And then, the first ripple appeared. A casual dinner conversation, a passing comment from an aide, a brief mention of children's routines, all seemed innocuous. But in hindsight, these were the warning signs. William, ever perceptive, had begun planting seeds. Conversations about schooling, about who would oversee certain activities, about the long-term welfare of the children, all subtle but purposeful. Each word measured, each interaction deliberate. The stage was being set for a decision that would leave Meghan reeling. Insiders suggest that these early maneuvers were not just about logistics. They were a test of reactions. How would Meghan respond to minor changes? Would Harry intervene? Would Charles or Kate voice opinions? Every response was observed, every expression catalogued, forming a blueprint for the moment that would come next. The calm, it seemed, was only an illusion, a carefully crafted veil over the storm gathering quietly beneath the palace roof. Meanwhile, the children remained blissfully unaware. Archie, playful and curious, asked questions that, to a casual observer, seemed ordinary. Lilibet, with her infectious laughter, brought joy to every room she entered. They were the center of this quiet battlefield, yet in their innocence, they had no idea the gravity of the forces swirling around them. Their lives were about to be intertwined with a drama far beyond their comprehension, a narrative crafted by adults whose decisions would shape not only their present, but their future. And then came the moment that shifted everything. Reports indicate it began with a seemingly routine meeting in one of the palace's private chambers. William, accompanied by a few senior advisors, gathered to discuss schedules, schooling, and the children's welfare. Meghan, occupied elsewhere, had no idea that this particular discussion would carry consequences far beyond its intended purpose. The details of that meeting remain classified to this day, but leaks suggest that it was here that William's intentions were solidified. Every phrase carefully considered, every option weighed, every potential fallout calculated. It was a quiet storm at first, words spoken in whispers, papers shuffled, decisions made that would later ripple outward in ways no one could anticipate. William, known for his calm demeanor, remained stoic, but insiders report a tension in the room, a sense that something irreversible had been set in motion. The plan was subtle, but the implications would be monumental. Meghan's world, for the moment, remained undisturbed. She continued her day, unaware of the storm gathering in the very rooms where she spent the happiest hours with her children. Yet, even at this stage, subtle signs hinted that a seismic shift was imminent. Advisors whispered to each other in hallways. Staff exchanged knowing glances. And somewhere, in the quiet heart of the palace, William's decision was quietly taking shape. As the day wore on, the calm began to fray. Small inconsistencies appeared in schedules, minor changes in routines, the sudden presence of additional aides and advisors. Each detail was a thread, pulled carefully to prepare the tapestry of what was to come. And while Meghan focused on the immediate needs of her children, the larger narrative was being written without her awareness. By evening, tension had grown almost palpable. Reports of late-night discussions, hurried meetings, and discreet phone calls indicate that William was moving toward the culmination of his plan. Those in the know describe a sense of inevitability, as if the palace itself was holding its breath, waiting for the moment when everything would change. And when that moment finally arrived, it would shock not only Meghan but the entire world. But even in the calm before the storm, there were hints, fleeting, subtle, almost imperceptible, that something unprecedented was about to occur. Staff noticed Meghan's occasional pauses, the way her laughter sometimes faltered when discussing her children's future. Harry sensed a quiet unease in her demeanor, a shadow that he couldn't fully dispel. And William, ever composed, seemed almost detached, yet every move was deliberate, a careful orchestration leading to the moment that would upend the palace and make headlines worldwide. No one could have predicted the emotional upheaval that would follow. No one could foresee the tears, the confrontations, or the decisions that would forever alter the dynamics of this family. What seemed like a normal day at Kensington Palace was, in truth, the calm before a storm that would leave Meghan devastated, Harry conflicted, and the public enthralled. And just as the sun set over the palace gardens, a message was quietly delivered, a statement of intent that would set the wheels in motion. The contents of that message, its timing, and its delivery were all calculated to produce maximum impact. Meghan's reaction would be immediate, raw, and emotionally devastating. And for those outside the inner circle, it would appear as though the universe itself had tilted in favor of William's unprecedented decision. William's private meeting. This chapter will be at least 2,000 words, opening with a mini-hook, building suspense, layering emotional and dramatic beats, and ending on a cliffhanger. What do you say when the person you never expected to make a power move quietly sets the stage for the biggest shock of your life? For Meghan Markle, that moment began in a room few outside the palace walls had ever seen. A room where decisions are made that ripple through history, where whispers of strategy carry more weight than public declarations, and where Prince William, the future king, gathered his advisors to shape a plan that would leave Meghan reeling. The private meeting, as insiders describe, was deliberately orchestrated to minimize leaks. It took place in a discreet chamber, away from cameras and the casual staff that normally circulated the palace. The walls, adorned with centuries of history, witnessed discussions that no public record could capture. Here, William and a select group of advisors, including senior aides, legal experts, and trusted family confidants, delved into a subject of unprecedented sensitivity, the future of Archie and Lilibet. William, known for his calm and measured demeanor, opened the session with clarity. Every word was intentional, every pause deliberate. According to sources, he began by laying out the reasoning behind increased involvement in his nieces' and nephews' lives. The rationale, while framed as concern for their welfare, carried a weight of authority, subtly signaling that this was not a suggestion for debate. It was a strategy already in motion. As the conversation unfolded, the gravity of the plan became clear. The advisors listened attentively, some taking notes, others observing the subtle cues in William's voice. Every scenario was considered: public perception, media reaction, legal implications, and the children's emotional well-being. What might appear to outsiders as an ordinary discussion about childcare was, in fact, a carefully calculated maneuver with historical, emotional, and political dimensions. William reportedly outlined the potential risks of leaving Archie and Lilibet primarily in Meghan and Harry's care. He cited concerns about media exposure, inconsistencies in routines, and the long-term consequences of what he deemed public spectacle parenting. Yet, beneath the ostensibly rational arguments, a more strategic narrative emerged. Every point, every example, seemed designed to subtly justify increased Cambridge oversight, to frame William's eventual decision as both inevitable and in the best interest of the children. Legal advisors weighed in cautiously, aware that any action taken without full disclosure could trigger controversy. Options were presented: private agreements, temporary guardianship arrangements, and eventual custody discussions framed as protective measures. All of these suggestions were carefully cataloged and dissected, their implications studied down to the finest detail. What's most striking about this meeting is the contrast between William's calm exterior and the high stakes beneath the surface. This wasn't merely a discussion about schedules or routines. It was a strategic play in a high-stakes game of family, power, and public perception. And Meghan, at this point, had no knowledge that this quiet plotting was underway. She remained in her routines with Archie and Lilibet, unaware that decisions about their immediate future were being quietly drafted in another part of the palace. As the hours passed, the discussion grew more specific. William, aided by advisors, reviewed potential outcomes, including public backlash, media scrutiny, and the reactions of Harry and Meghan themselves. Contingency plans were debated. What if Meghan resisted? What if leaks occurred? What if the story reached the tabloids prematurely? Each possibility was anticipated, each response carefully scripted. The meeting was more than planning. It was a rehearsal for a moment that would soon shock the world. Observers outside the palace might have dismissed these actions as ordinary family concern. But within the walls of that private chamber, the dynamics were tense, electric, and consequential. Every detail mattered. The phrasing of future statements, the timing of communications, the subtle psychological preparation to ensure compliance from those involved. Sources report that William, while appearing composed, displayed a level of focus that hinted at the monumental impact this meeting would have on Meghan, Harry, and the children. Meanwhile, Meghan remained unaware, absorbed in her daily tasks. Little did she know that a decision made in that room would soon interrupt her routines, challenge her authority as a mother, and place her in the eye of a media storm. One critical aspect of the discussion was timing. William and his advisors debated the precise moment to act. Acting too soon could provoke resistance. Acting too late could allow media narratives to dominate. The balance was delicate. It was decided that the announcement, or revelation, should coincide with a moment that would maximize both impact and plausibility. Every variable was considered: the children's school schedules, Meghan's public appearances, Harry's commitments. The meticulousness of the plan left no room for error. Insiders describe a moment in the meeting where William paused, surveying the faces of his advisors. There was an unspoken understanding. What they were about to initiate would not just affect family dynamics. It could redefine public perception of Meghan, Harry, and the Cambridge legacy. Every angle had been considered, every potential backlash calculated. The weight of responsibility, however, was entirely on William's shoulders. One misstep, and the plan could backfire spectacularly, turning a strategic move into a public relations disaster. By the end of the meeting, a clear course of action had been established. Draft statements were prepared, contingencies outlined, and instructions issued to key aides. William's strategy was no longer theoretical, it was operational. Those present described the energy in the room as tense, but purposeful. This was not a confrontation. It was a calculated, premeditated step that would soon become impossible to ignore. And yet, even in this controlled environment, uncertainty lingered. How would Meghan react? Would Harry intervene? Could the palace maintain secrecy long enough to execute the plan without leaks? These questions hung in the air like a storm cloud, heavy and foreboding. The meeting concluded, but the consequences were already in motion. Outside the room, life continued as usual, or so it seemed. Meghan, blissfully unaware, carried on with her morning routines, the laughter of Archie and Lilibet echoing through the halls. Yet the palace itself seemed charged, as if the walls had absorbed the tension of that private chamber. Staff whispered quietly, aware of the gravity of the discussions, but sworn to secrecy. Every detail, from lighting to seating arrangements, every phrase spoken in private corridors, was a small piece of a puzzle that was about to explode. What makes this moment particularly dramatic is the contrast between visibility and invisibility. To the public, nothing had changed. Meghan's days remained filled with the innocent joys of motherhood. But in reality, a quiet revolution was underway, one that would shift power, influence, and parental authority in ways that few could anticipate. William's private meeting had set the stage, but the play had not yet begun. And then came the final, chilling moment of the meeting. William, having outlined his strategy, concluded with a statement so definitive that even the most seasoned advisors took note. It was clear that his decision was not a suggestion, not a proposal. It was a declaration of intent. The implications were monumental. Archie and Lilibet's lives, Meghan's authority as a mother, and the dynamics between Harry and William were all now subject to this quiet, calculated plan. As the advisors filed out, the air remained thick with anticipation. Everyone present understood that what had just been set into motion would not remain private for long. The palace had entered a new era of tension, one that would leave Meghan stunned, Harry unsettled, and the public riveted. And while the world would soon learn fragments of this drama through leaks, reports, and speculation, the full scope of William's plan remained a closely guarded secret, known only to those inside the walls of that private chamber. What happens when the world you thought you controlled suddenly slips through your fingers? For Meghan Markle, that moment arrived with a wave of disbelief, shock, and heartbreak. She had spent months navigating the delicate balance of motherhood, public scrutiny, and palace expectations, believing she had a measure of control over her children's lives. But in one unexpected turn, Prince William's decision to raise Archie and Lilibet shook that belief to its core. It began quietly. Meghan was in the nursery, Lilibet giggling as she stacked her favorite blocks, Archie practicing his early reading, when a subtle shift in the atmosphere unsettled her. A message delivered discreetly through one of the senior aides hinted at changes she could barely process. At first, she dismissed it, assuming it was routine scheduling or minor adjustments. But as the details unfolded, the reality hit her. William had made a decision that impacted the very heart of her world. The lives of her children. Her initial reaction was disbelief. How could this happen without consultation? Without a single discussion, a single acknowledgement of her role as a mother? Meghan, who had carefully navigated every nuance of royal protocol, suddenly found herself sidelined in decisions about her own children. The palace, which she had learned to read like a chessboard, now seemed like a labyrinth designed to isolate and control. Insiders describe her state as a mixture of shock and fury. Her hands trembled slightly as she held Archie's drawing, the innocent shapes suddenly a stark contrast to the chaos of adult machinations around her. Questions ran through her mind, rapid fire. Why didn't anyone ask me? How could William do this? What does this mean for Harry, for me, for the children? Every answer seemed to carry a sting of betrayal. But Meghan's reaction was not only emotional, it was strategic. Those closest to her note that she immediately began considering her options. Legal pathways, potential public responses, private negotiations. Her mind raced to reclaim agency in a situation where she felt disempowered. Every instinct she had developed since joining the royal family kicked in. She knew that a direct confrontation could escalate tensions, yet silence could be equally dangerous. The delicate balance of response, perception, and action weighed heavily on her. Meanwhile, the emotional weight of the moment was undeniable. Tears, whispered frustrations, and moments of quiet despair punctuated her day. Meghan, accustomed to maintaining composure in public, found herself alone in moments of vulnerability. These private spaces revealed the human cost of royal politics, the heartbreak, the fear, and the sense of isolation that accompanies such high-stakes family drama. The nursery, once a sanctuary, now became a space shadowed by uncertainty. The palace staff observed the change in her demeanor with concern. Meghan's normally confident stride became measured, her laughter with the children tinged with a fleeting melancholy. A private aide described a moment when Meghan paused at the window, watching the gardens with a distant expression, as if searching for clarity or a sign that the world outside still made sense. Her eyes, usually so expressive and radiant, reflected a storm brewing within, a mix of confusion, hurt, and resolve. Publicly, Meghan had long been a master at managing perception. But now, the challenge was different. This was not about a media appearance or a carefully curated event. This was about the very essence of her family life being redirected without consent. The realization that William had taken decisive action, quietly and deliberately, forced her to confront not just the loss of control, but the implications for her children's upbringing. What experiences, what routines, what moments of learning and bonding could be altered by this shift? In the following hours, Meghan reportedly sought counsel from trusted allies. Conversations were discreet, conducted in hushed tones, focusing on options and potential next steps. Legal experts, friends within and outside the royal circle, and even former palace aides offered insights. Every piece of advice, however, was tempered by caution. The stakes were enormous. One misstep could spark a public controversy that would overshadow not only her reputation, but also the delicate image of the family as a whole. At the same time, her internal conflict was intense. Meghan had long understood the complexities of royal life, the constant balancing of duty, public perception, and personal desire. But this was different. This was a move that struck at the heart of motherhood, the one role she had assumed as her own. The cognitive dissonance between her public poise and private anguish created a tension that she struggled to reconcile. Even Harry's presence could not fully mitigate the impact. Sources suggest that Harry, aware of William's actions, attempted to support Meghan emotionally, while also grappling with his own sense of frustration and betrayal. The couple's private conversations were intense, reflecting both love and conflict, strategy and emotion. They debated options, weighed the potential fallout, and considered the implications for the children. Yet, every solution seemed constrained by the walls of tradition, protocol, and public expectation. Meanwhile, the palace itself became a character in the unfolding drama. The grandeur and tradition of Kensington seemed at odds with the emotional turmoil inside. Every corridor, every ornate room, every hushed meeting space now carried weighty significance. Staff reported a change in atmosphere, a quiet tension that permeated even mundane activities. Meals were more subdued, interactions more calculated. The environment reflected the subtle but undeniable fracture forming at the heart of the family. As the day progressed, Meghan's emotional intensity deepened. Reports indicate moments of private tears, attempts to regain composure, and bursts of strategic thinking. She oscillated between grief and determination, her love for the children driving a desire to assert influence while navigating the treacherous waters of palace politics. Every decision now carried emotional, public, and personal consequences. And then, the first ripple of public awareness emerged. Leaks, subtle and carefully controlled, began circulating in the media. Speculation about William's decision, whispers of increased involvement in Archie and Lilibet's lives, and the suggestion of a quietly orchestrated move reached tabloids and royal commentators. Meghan, already reeling from the private impact, now had to contend with the public narrative, a story partially true, partially speculative, and wholly destabilizing. Social media erupted. Fans and critics alike debated the implications, dissected leaked statements, and speculated about Meghan's response. For someone who had meticulously managed public perception, this new level of exposure added pressure. Every post, every comment, every viral headline became a reminder that the personal had become painfully public. And yet, amidst the tears and strategic considerations, Meghan demonstrated resilience. While emotionally vulnerable, she began to craft responses, subtle moves that would preserve her agency, protect her children, and prepare for the next stage of this unfolding drama. Her emotional depth, strategic mind, and determination became apparent even to those outside her immediate circle. But the story was far from over. Meghan's initial reaction, raw and emotional as it was, set the stage for confrontations, revelations, and decisions that would escalate tensions and deepen the drama. The impact of William's private meeting, the decisions made in that room, and the ripple effects throughout the palace were only beginning to manifest. How does a family that appears united to the outside world fracture in ways that no one sees coming? The royal family, long regarded as a symbol of tradition, stability, and continuity, was now facing internal tensions that threatened to redefine its very foundation. William's decision to raise Archie and Lilibet, a move so unprecedented that it sent shockwaves through the palace, created a rift that extended far beyond Meghan and Harry. It tested loyalties, questioned allegiances, and forced each member to confront uncomfortable truths about family, authority, and trust. At the center of this storm was Prince Charles, the patriarch of the monarchy, whose own relationship with Meghan and Harry had always been complex. Reports suggest that Charles was caught between supporting William's strategic move and maintaining harmony within the family. On one hand, he understood the importance of protecting the children's upbringing, ensuring they were guided by stability and tradition. On the other, he recognized the emotional fallout for Meghan and Harry, whose loyalty to each other had been tested repeatedly since their departure from frontline royal duties. Kate, Duchess of Cambridge, found herself navigating a delicate balance as well. Sources indicate that she was torn between her role as a supportive sister-in-law and her loyalty to William, whose calculated decision now placed her in a critical position. Kate's influence, often subtle and strategic, became increasingly important as advisors looked for ways to maintain cohesion amid rising tensions. Every word, every glance, every gesture was scrutinized for meaning. Publicly, she remained composed, but behind closed doors, the stress of mediating family dynamics weighed heavily on her. Princess Anne, known for her straightforwardness and keen awareness of palace politics, reportedly voiced concerns about the public perception of family discord, and, who has always prioritized protocol and legacy, understood that any visible rift could be magnified by the media and social media alike. While supportive of William's intentions, she also warned that underestimating Meghan's response could lead to unintended consequences, a scenario that could escalate beyond the palace's control. Even minor players within the palace felt the tension. Aides, security personnel, and staff who had served multiple generations of royals reported a palpable shift in atmosphere. Meetings were more cautious, discussions more measured, and casual interactions now carried an unspoken weight. Everyone sensed that the family's cohesion was fragile and that the decisions of a few could reverberate through every corner of the monarchy. The division was not just about personal relationships. It was about power, perception, and influence. William's decision to raise Archie and Lilibet was, on the surface, framed as an act of protection. But beneath that rationale, it carried a message. Authority, vision, and control within the family hierarchy had shifted. Those who supported the move saw it as necessary for the children's welfare and for the preservation of tradition. Those who opposed it viewed it as a breach of trust, a power play that undermined the bonds of family and threatened to isolate Meghan and Harry further. Harry's position in this division was particularly complex. Loyal to Meghan, yet conscious of his own role within the family, he faced intense pressure. Should he publicly defend his wife? Should he negotiate privately? Should he confront William directly? Every decision was fraught with risk, with emotional, political, and public consequences. Sources indicate that Harry spent hours in private discussion with Meghan, weighing strategies, anticipating reactions, and attempting to protect both their family and their public image. Meghan, meanwhile, felt the weight of isolation. The subtle cues, the hushed conversations, and the quiet strategies unfolding around her created an emotional pressure that was difficult to bear. She had allies, yes, but in a family where protocol, loyalty, and hierarchy dictated interactions, even her closest supporters could do little to alter the trajectory set by William's private meeting. The sense of being outmaneuvered, despite her intelligence and resourcefulness, added a layer of frustration and heartbreak to an already tense situation. Even the children, though largely shielded from the strategic maneuvers of adults, became symbols in this growing divide. Archie and Lilibet, innocent yet central to the unfolding drama, were the focal point of competing visions for their upbringing. Each family member, advisor, and aide viewed their care through a different lens, reflecting personal priorities, strategic considerations, and deeply held beliefs about tradition, protection, and legacy. Public perception, of course, was a silent but ever-present player in this drama. Leaks to tabloids and royal commentators hinted at a family divided, fueling speculation, debates, and viral commentary. The tension was magnified by social media, where fans and critics dissected every move, every glance, every statement for clues. William's decision, while deliberate, became a lightning rod for public fascination and judgment, further complicating the internal dynamics of the family. It was within this atmosphere of tension and division that subtle maneuvers began to emerge. Private meetings, discreet communications, and carefully timed statements became essential tools for navigating the fractured family landscape. William's advisors monitored reactions, anticipating resistance or pushback. Meghan's allies strategized responses that could assert her role as a mother while avoiding direct confrontation with the established hierarchy. Harry attempted to mediate where possible, though his own emotions and loyalties complicated every decision. And yet, despite the division, there were moments of quiet reflection and fleeting attempts at unity. Small gestures, whispered reassurances, and discreet conversations reminded everyone that, beneath the tension, the bonds of family were still present. But these moments were fragile, overshadowed by the enormity of the decisions at hand and the potential fallout of William's unprecedented move. By the end of the week, it was clear that the family was irrevocably divided. Each member had taken a position, whether openly or subtly, in support of or opposition to William's plan. The consequences were already beginning to ripple through the palace, affecting routines, communications, and even the emotional well-being of Archie and Lilibet. Observers outside the inner circle could only speculate, while those inside navigated a complex web of loyalty, strategy, and emotional stakes. And then came a moment that crystallized the division. A private conversation, overheard by a trusted aide, revealed the depth of disagreement among senior family members. Words spoken in hushed tones, expressions of frustration and concern, and subtle gestures of disapproval underscored the reality. This was no longer a simple matter of childcare or routine. It was a fundamental clash of authority, perspective, and vision for the future of the monarchy. The palace, with all its grandeur and tradition, had become a theater of tension. Every action, every word, and every glance was loaded with significance. For Meghan, the implications were deeply personal, her authority as a mother challenged, her trust in the family tested, and her emotions stretched to their limits. For William, the move was a strategic assertion of control, yet one fraught with risk and uncertainty. And for Harry, caught in the crossfire, the stakes were equally high, as he balanced loyalty, love, and public scrutiny. No one could predict how the public would react or how the internal dynamics would evolve. What was clear, however, was that the royal family, long seen as a symbol of unity and tradition, was now navigating a fracture that could redefine relationships, influence public perception, and shape the lives of the children at the center of this unprecedented drama. And just as whispers of division began to circulate beyond the palace walls, a new leak hinted at an even more shocking revelation, one that would deepen the rift and force each family member to confront uncomfortable truths about loyalty, power, and the cost of their decisions. Insider Revelations leak. This chapter will be at least 2,000 words, opening with a mini hook, building suspense, layering emotional beats, and ending on a cliffhanger. What happens when secrets meant to stay behind palace walls suddenly explode into the public sphere? For the royal family, and especially for Meghan Markle, the answer came in the form of insider revelations that no one anticipated. Whispers, once confined to hushed corridors and discreet conversations, were now amplified across tabloids, social media, and 24-hour news cycles. Every carefully guarded strategy, every private decision, and every emotional reaction became fodder for public consumption. It began with subtle hints. A cryptic message in a gossip column, a photograph in a seemingly mundane moment, an offhand comment from a palace staffer, all of it pieced together like breadcrumbs leading to a startling revelation. Sources suggest that the leak originated from someone with intimate knowledge of William's private meeting, someone who understood the magnitude of the decision but chose to expose it to the world. The motivation remains debated. Was it a warning, a vendetta, or simply the inevitability of secrets slipping through cracks in the palace walls? For Meghan, the timing could not have been worse. Already reeling from the knowledge that William had decided to raise Archie and Lilibet, she now faced the added pressure of public scrutiny. Every detail, every leak, every speculative headline challenged her emotionally and strategically. How could she respond without fueling further speculation? How could she protect her children while navigating the relentless glare of media attention? These questions dominated her thoughts as she attempted to maintain composure in front of the children and the world alike. The content of the leaks was explosive. Allegedly, they included private discussions, strategic decisions, and personal reactions from Meghan herself. Every snippet painted a picture of tension, division, and high-stakes maneuvering within the royal family. To the public, it seemed as though the palace had transformed overnight from a symbol of unity to a theater of intrigue and conflict. For Meghan, this was more than just embarrassment. It was a violation of privacy and trust on an unprecedented scale. Tabloids and social media went into overdrive. Headlines screamed of betrayal, drama, and heartbreak. Meghan in tears over William's secret plan, read one. Royal rift deepens as Cambridge takes control, read another. The narrative, crafted from carefully leaked information, cast Meghan as both victim and strategist, a mother fighting for her children while navigating a web of family politics. Public reaction was intense, with millions weighing in, taking sides, and dissecting every angle of the story. Insiders report that Meghan's emotional response to the leaks was immediate and visceral. Tears, anger, and a sense of helplessness were compounded by frustration at the inevitability of public scrutiny. Every private moment, once a sanctuary, now felt exposed. The nursery, once a haven for laughter and learning, became a silent reminder of what had been taken from her control. Meghan's instincts shifted rapidly from shock to action. Legal counsel was consulted, private strategies were debated, and allies within and outside the palace were mobilized. The leaks also intensified divisions within the royal family. Members who had remained neutral or tentative were forced to take sides, consciously or unconsciously. Charles, Kate, and each responded in ways that reflected both loyalty and strategy, further complicating the internal dynamics. Every statement, gesture, and private conversation became loaded with significance as family members navigated not only the leak's fallout, but the emotional ramifications of William's original decision. For the public, the story was irresistible. Royal watchers dissected body language in photos, analyzed tone in public statements, and speculated endlessly about the hidden dynamics of the family. Social media became a battleground, with fans defending Meghan, supporting William, or questioning the motivations of everyone involved. The leak created a feedback loop. Public scrutiny intensified, which in turn influenced internal palace strategies, which then generated more leaks. One particularly shocking aspect of the leak involved Meghan's private reaction. Sources suggest that her grief and anger were palpable, yet measured enough to signal resilience and strategy. Reports indicated moments of silent tears, intense private discussions with Harry, and careful planning for next steps, all of which were partially exposed in the leaked material. For someone who had always been adept at managing public perception, this breach of privacy was both personal and strategic, forcing her to respond on multiple fronts simultaneously. The impact on Harry was profound. Already navigating the emotional fallout of William's decision, he now had to contend with the public's perception of Meghan, himself, and their family unit. The leaks forced Harry into an active role in damage control, strategizing private responses while maintaining appearances in public settings. Every interaction with Meghan, every statement, and every action became a delicate dance between emotional support and calculated response. The palace itself was thrown into crisis mode. Advisors, security teams, and senior staff scrambled to contain the damage. Media spokespeople drafted statements, legal teams reviewed potential implications, and internal communications were tightened to prevent further leaks. Even the most disciplined staff recognized the unprecedented nature of the situation. A family decision had become a public spectacle overnight, exposing vulnerabilities that had previously been tightly guarded. And yet, amidst the chaos, a deeper layer of intrigue began to surface. Some insiders hinted at rivalries, hidden agendas, and power plays that extended beyond the immediate issue of childcare. Was the leak purely informational, or was it designed to shift perceptions, influence decisions, or destabilize alliances? The questions hung in the air, unanswered but potent, adding tension to an already volatile situation. For Meghan, the challenge was multifaceted. She had to protect her children, navigate the fractured dynamics of the royal family, and manage her own emotional well-being, all while under the relentless scrutiny of the world. Every choice carried consequences, both immediate and long-term, and the leak made it impossible to operate in secrecy or quiet. Her strategy had to be swift, precise, and calculated, balancing vulnerability with strength, emotion with reason. As the days following the leak unfolded, the intensity of public attention grew. Social media metrics skyrocketed, tabloids ran multiple daily updates, and global news outlets dissected every angle. Analysts debated William's motives, Meghan's response, and the potential fallout for the monarchy. Yet behind the headlines, the real story was far more complex. A family navigating betrayal, strategy, and emotion, with children at the center of every decision. And just when it seemed the leak had revealed everything, insiders suggested that even more shocking revelations were waiting in the wings. Documents, conversations, and strategic plans hinted at a deeper narrative, one that would escalate tensions, force confrontations, and ultimately redefine relationships within the family. Harry's dilemma. This chapter will be at least 2,000 words, opening with a mini hook, building tension, layering emotional beats, and ending on a cliffhanger. What happens when loyalty, love, and duty collide in ways that leave no clear path forward? For Prince Harry, that moment arrived in full force as the fallout from William's unprecedented decision to raise Archie and Lilibet unfolded. Torn between defending Meghan, protecting his children, and navigating the treacherous waters of royal expectations, Harry found himself facing a dilemma with consequences he could not afford to ignore. From the moment the insider leaks hit the press, Harry was thrust into action. Reports suggest that he spent hours analyzing every fragment of information, piecing together what had been shared, what was misrepresented, and what remained hidden. Every decision carried multiple layers of impact, not just on the family dynamic, but on public perception, media narratives, and the long-term legacy of the monarchy. It was a balancing act of unprecedented complexity. At the core of Harry's dilemma was a simple but devastating reality. He could not fully control William's actions, and yet he bore the emotional responsibility of ensuring Meghan's well-being. Sources describe him moving between private consultations with legal experts, strategic discussions with Meghan, and tense communications with palace aides. Each conversation was a careful negotiation, balancing diplomacy with the urgent need to assert influence over decisions affecting their children. The emotional toll on Harry was profound. Insiders describe moments of intense frustration and helplessness, particularly when he observed Meghan struggling to maintain composure amidst the relentless public scrutiny. He knew that any misstep on his part could escalate tensions further, yet the desire to protect his family drove him to explore every possible course of action. Sleepless nights, long walks in solitude, and private, often emotional, discussions with Meghan became the backdrop to his growing sense of urgency. Meanwhile, the public narrative added pressure. Every move Harry made was analyzed in real time. Headlines speculated about disagreements between the brothers, debated the effectiveness of Harry's interventions, and suggested growing rifts within the family. Social media amplified every perceived slight, creating an environment in which even a small miscalculation could become a major scandal. Harry had to navigate not only internal family dynamics, but the unrelenting scrutiny of millions worldwide. The children, Archie and Lilibet, remained at the center of the dilemma. Harry's concern extended beyond strategy and optics. It was deeply personal. He understood that the decisions made by William and the rest of the family would shape their experiences, routines, and emotional development. Every plan he considered had to prioritize their well-being, even as the adults around them engaged in a high-stakes chess game of authority, loyalty, and control. A critical aspect of Harry's struggle was communication, or the lack thereof. Sources indicate that conversations with William were tense, brief, and highly controlled. Attempts to mediate or negotiate were met with a mixture of politeness, strategic deflection, and subtle assertion of authority. Harry quickly realized that traditional forms of dialogue were insufficient. He needed to anticipate moves, counter them discreetly, and ensure Meghan's voice remained central in decisions affecting their family. Legal considerations further complicated Harry's dilemma. Advisors warned that any overt challenge to William's authority could trigger legal battles, create media frenzy, or jeopardize public trust. This tension forced Harry into a delicate strategy: assert influence without confrontation, protect his family without appearing antagonistic, and manage public perception without losing control of the narrative. Each step required precise calculation, emotional restraint, and a keen awareness of potential fallout. In private, Harry struggled with the personal impact of the situation. Friends close to him describe a mix of anger, frustration, and a profound sense of injustice. He questioned why William would act in a way that undermined Meghan, why the palace hierarchy allowed such a move, and why the emotional needs of the children seemed secondary to strategic considerations. These thoughts, while private, shaped his every decision, adding layers of urgency, tension, and determination to his approach. Despite the pressure, Harry also sought moments of clarity. Long walks, private reflection, and conversations with trusted allies helped him weigh options, consider outcomes, and prepare for potential confrontations. His determination to protect his family coexisted with a recognition of the complex dynamics he faced. Loyalty to Meghan, love for his children, and respect for his family's traditions created a tightrope of competing priorities, with no room for error. Meanwhile, Meghan's reactions and strategies influenced Harry's decisions at every step. Her blend of emotional vulnerability and strategic thinking provided both guidance and insight. Together, they assessed risks, anticipated public reactions, and explored ways to assert their authority while minimizing confrontation. The partnership, though under extreme pressure, became the cornerstone of Harry's approach. The palace atmosphere, already tense, intensified as Harry's dilemma unfolded. Advisors and staff sensed the heightened emotions, noting subtle shifts in interactions, meetings, and communications. Even minor gestures, a glance, a tone of voice, a carefully worded email, carried amplified significance. The stakes, for Harry and the family as a whole, could not have been higher. As the days progressed, Harry realized that every potential response had consequences. A direct challenge could spark a public feud. Silence could undermine Meghan's authority and embolden William. Strategic negotiation required precision and patience. Each option carried emotional, political, and practical ramifications, forcing Harry to weigh every move with extraordinary care. And then came a revelation that would complicate the dilemma even further. Reports of additional insider leaks hinted at the possibility that William's plan was more extensive than initially believed. Documents and private communications suggested not only increased involvement in the children's upbringing, but also potential restrictions on Meghan and Harry's decision-making authority. The stakes had escalated, and Harry's already complex dilemma had grown exponentially. Every decision, every conversation, and every consideration now carried heightened importance. Harry's ability to protect Meghan, advocate for the children, and navigate the fractured family dynamics was being tested in ways unprecedented in modern royal history. The emotional, strategic, and public pressures converged, creating a dilemma that few outside the palace could comprehend. Yet, even amidst the turmoil, Harry's determination remained clear. He would not be passive. He would not let his family's future be dictated solely by the strategic ambitions of others. Every option was considered, every consequence weighed, and every move planned with the dual goals of protecting his children and preserving Meghan's authority as their mother. But the question remained, could Harry navigate this minefield without igniting a full-blown family crisis? Could he protect Meghan and the children while maintaining the delicate balance of loyalty, love, and royal duty? The answers would soon unfold in ways no one anticipated, and the next revelation would push Harry, Meghan, and the entire royal family to the brink. What happens when the innocence of childhood intersects with the ruthless strategies of adults? For Archie and Lilibet, the central figures in this royal drama, their lives had already become more complicated than most children could ever imagine. While adults debated authority, loyalty, and legacy, the children were unwittingly swept into a storm they could neither control nor fully comprehend. Archie, at just a few years old, was perceptive beyond his years. Friends of the family note that he had begun noticing subtle shifts in his environment, changes in routines, whispers between adults, and the sudden absence of familiar faces. While most toddlers are absorbed in play, Archie's keen observation hinted at an innate sensitivity to the emotional currents around him. Every glance exchanged between William, Harry, and Meghan, every hushed conversation, became part of the invisible web of influence shaping his world. Lilibet, though younger, exhibited her own form of awareness. Playtime, which had once been carefree and uninterrupted, now carried undercurrents of tension. Staff observed fleeting moments of hesitation or uncertainty in her expressions, small indicators that she, too, was picking up on the emotional shifts surrounding her. Children, unlike adults, do not have the ability to contextualize political maneuvers or familial strategy. They respond instinctively to atmosphere, energy, and emotional tone. For Meghan, watching her children navigate this delicate terrain was both heartbreaking and urgent. Every decision William and his advisors made had a direct impact on the children's daily lives. Mealtimes, play schedules, learning activities, and even small moments of bonding were suddenly under scrutiny. Meghan's emotional stakes were deeply personal. She understood that the integrity of her children's upbringing, their sense of security, and their emotional well-being were now intertwined with palace politics in ways she had never anticipated. Harry, too, felt the weight of responsibility. His focus extended beyond strategy and negotiation. He had to ensure that Archie and Lilibet were shielded from unnecessary stress while still being prepared for the changes unfolding around them. Every conversation he had with Meghan, every meeting with advisors, was informed by the need to protect the children's innocence while navigating a world that was increasingly complex and unpredictable. Insiders reveal moments of poignant clarity during this period. Meghan would sit with the children in quiet corners of the nursery, reading stories and observing their reactions. She noted subtle signs of stress, a brief hesitation in laughter, a fleeting shadow of concern in their eyes, a momentary pause when routines were disrupted. These observations fueled her determination to maintain consistency, stability, and love amidst the surrounding chaos. Meanwhile, William's decisions directly influenced how the